Good evening, kids. Welcome to this week's episode of Video Ferox. So, what are we watching tonight? Dun 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 dun. We're watching Terminator 2. So, let's roll the trailer and we'll be back.
They thought they were fighting only against aliens. They were sure that they had won their battle, but they were mistaken. Shocking dark.
Fuller.
Fuck you! A ferocious.
You bastard!
Indestructible. Ruthless Terminator. Shocking dark.
Alrighty, welcome back from the trailer to Terminator 2 by Bruno Mattei, which is not at all Terminator. Not at all Terminator. So, Brad, did you like Terminator 2?
I liked the James Cameron film an awful lot. Oh, wait. We're talking about Bruno Mattei, aren't we?
We're talking about Bruno Mattei. That joke's done. Okay, that's the last time we'll make that. Never mind. Please, go on.
I enjoyed this movie. I thought it was a lot of fun. It's silly fun. It's not really a movie one can take seriously in any way, shape, or form because it's just so incredibly insane. I'm pretty sure that if James Cameron had seen this earlier on in his career, he would have dropped a major lawsuit on Bruno Mattei.
He was busy fending off lawsuits from Harlan Ellison, so he can't really talk. And actually, I desperately want to know what James Cameron thinks about this movie. Just like, what the fuck are you doing to my... I loved it. I mean, Hell of the Living Dead is the better Bruno Mattei movie than this one, but I still loved it.
This movie is just weird and
fun. I think a good word is fun. Lots of fun. When you come into a Bruno Mattei movie, you kind of know what you're gonna get. Cheap, cheesy, Italian, and this is all three of those boxes.
It's definitely far from being his worst. We've watched some terrible Bruno Mattei movies, and this one is definitely higher up in the value category simply because of the level of insanity it brings to the table.
All right, well, I mean, what the hell else are we going to say other than it's time for some spoilers? Shall we get to the spoilers?
Spoilers.
Spoilers ahead.
How can it be?
Alrighty, spoilers ahoy from this point on. And like I said, I mean, we don't really need to sum up things too much because, I mean, it really is a beat-for-beat remake of Alien until about the last 15 minutes or so, and then it suddenly shifts gears into the Terminator, but whatever. So it opens with this modern day being I think this movie was made in 1986 or thereabouts, something like that.
I think so.
Yeah, so it opens with the late 80s Venice, and it's all the tourist shots. So you like that church with the courtyard that you saw out of Last Crusade that you were like, oh, okay, I know that courtyard. And it talks with this voiceover about, you know, how the ecological disaster is coming. But right now, everything's cool. Everything's chill. You know, people are living in harmony. Everything's cool. And then they talk about the seaweed that, like, is choking off the oxygen in the water.
Some sort of mutant seaweed, because when you really think about it, seaweed, being a plant, is a producer of oxygen. And a real plant wouldn't consume oxygen because that's not what they do. The only way a plant would actually consume oxygen was after it dies and rots, and the bacteria needs the oxygen. But
Science nerd.
that's obviously something they didn't do their homework on, but chalking it up to a mutant, ecological destroying seaweed that's designed to do that actually makes a degree of sense.
But the water levels are rising in Venice, and the acidic water is like eating the foundation of Venice, and so the city is sinking into the sea. Which, okay, yeah, so they're 30 years ahead of schedule, but they're actually not too far off from what's actually happening in Venice
No.
these days.
Between global warming and oceanic acidification, that is exactly what's happening in Venice right now. So, it's like, go figure.
We jump forward 20 or 30 years, an indeterminate amount of time. And what they did is actually a really effective scene, because all they did was they, instead of shooting the tourists in the courtyard and happy people all day long, they shooting on, like, I'm going to guess probably like a Sunday morning where like nobody's in Venice and all of the canals are quiet. And so they throw this gray filter over the lens. And so it looks overcast. It looks dreary and bleak. And they throw a couple of prop signs saying, don't drink the water or you will die, that sort of thing.
They did kind of a howling wind sound effect too that made it just seem even more bleak and desolate.
Yeah, they drop out the music. It's actually really kind of sinister.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for a cheap, no-budget Italian cheapie.
When I was watching the opening, I'm like, wow, there's some actual quality production value here.
So we pick up the story, X amount of years later, and Weyland-Yutani has a reactor that's under Venice, I guess. There's some sort of rehabilitation project. They're sort of doing this better future for mankind living through chemistry or some bullshit, or I don't know what's going on. But of course, because it's aliens, teams on the inside go offline, and Weyland-Yutani is like, oh, well, shit, we've got to go send a team of people in to go find out what the hell's going on. So they gather up this team of Megaforce.
I heard that noise and I'm like,
And so the evil corporation, they gather these space marines. And, okay, when James Cameron did Aliens, there was this, the scene where they had all them space marines, like they're doing their bonding stuff and Vasquez is flipping shit to Apone and bullshit like that. Cameron very famously shot that at the very end of the production, so you had this sort of camaraderie and chemistry between the characters.
the actors had already become friends and it showed.
In this one, the cast shows up on set, Bruno Mattei hands him a script and says, action! And that's all the prep they get. And it shows. Oh my God. The Vasquez analog, who is played by Garetta, who you'll infamously know from Demons. But that's not her only flick. I mean, she's really, she's done a lot of Italian cheapy stuff.
And she's sort of like a fusion of Vasquez and Apone.
And she is misogynistic and patriotic, and I don't even know what the other words I'm looking for is. She's racist and sexist and probably homophobic, and
She has every single negative quality you could find in a person, and yet at the same time you like her as a character because she's actually got her shit together. She is the only character who has her shit together in the entire film.
This scene goes on forever and ever and ever. Oh my God, it just drags on with characters you don't like that are doing actions that are pretty vile, and I'm like, can we just get to the point, please?
Every single person is unlikable, with the sole exception of the Vasquez character, who is a person that I would hate on sight, but she's the only character that you actually click with, which is just, it's wrong that you click with and connect with a character who's so fundamentally unlikable.
And so into this mess of characters, they inject a company man representative, the Burke of the piece. And of course, the Ripley, who is this anthropologist person?
Yeah.
I think. I don't know what she's doing
She's
there.
a science type.
She's a science type that's been injected into the team because they need a Ripley.
I do remember an explanation for why she was with the team. I remember them going through that. I don't remember what the explanation was.
Yet again, intimately familiar with Terminator and Aliens, no fucking clue what's happening.
I don't even remember the name of the evil corporation. I've been thinking of it as Weyland-Yutani merged with Umbrella.
You know, yes, we call it Weyland-Yutani, but I mean, it really is a lot more Umbrella in their methodology and approach to their science. And I'm totally spoiling the end of the movie because it's...
There are some surprises, and those are not anything in the Aliens ripoff section. It's all in the Terminator ripoff section.
Yeah, because I wasn't expecting them to suddenly shift gears. I'm like, okay, here comes the reactor's about to blow up. We've got 5 minutes to reach minimum safe distance, and now it's a time machine travel movie. And it's like, wow, where did that come from? Well, we'll get to that in a second. So they send Megaforce into the complex, which is this vast underground labyrinth of steam tunnels and pipes and ductwork and catwalks and bullshit like that. And here's the point of the movie where I'm like, okay, this movie's actually looking pretty good, because what happened was that the producers of the movie, they knew somebody who worked with the oldest nuclear reactor in Italy at the time. And so they said, hey, can we use your basement to shoot our monster movie in? And they said, yeah, sure, no problem. So it looks great.
It's this complicated labyrinth that goes on forever, and there's all this industrial looking equipment everywhere, and you've got these hardened basically blast doors, because it is a nuclear power plant. If there was an accident, you don't want that shit going anywhere. So they've got these reinforced doors and heavy walls, and
the lighting is really good too. They, I don't know who did the lighting on this, but it is top notch. It looks great. The steam and the smoke and the sparks all look great. I mean, it's a really effective setting for their movie.
Another thing is when people go missing, like they inevitably do in a movie like this, they don't go looking for them. They're just like, oh, she's tough, she'll take care of it.
And so for the next 20 or so minutes, this is the bit where the Space Marines go into the alien hive and start figuring out that all the colonists have been taken and whatnot. But they can't afford a dozen colonists, so they in fact take poor old Vasquez and they throw some Halloween spirit webbing on her and stuff her into a footlocker and just call it a day. That's the extent of the alien parasite takeover.
It's implied that the people who worked at this facility were the ones that got taken over and turned into the aliens, but they don't actually have any references or clues to it. They just is kind of hand-waved.
But there's a Newt in there somewhere.
That's true. They find a little girl.
And the little girl, who isn't 10 years old like Newt was, she's probably about 18, so she's an adult. She also has this weird accent, this almost a Boris and Natasha.
Daddy said it was all the fault of the Tubular Corporation.
They take Newt and the remaining Space Marines and they get into the central core computer area.
The operations area is what I call it.
That's when they're like, well, what the hell's going on? I don't, this mystery is still a mystery. And Newt goes over and flips a couple of switches on this computer. And all of a sudden we get Weyland-Yutani's PowerPoint presentation of their evil scheme. And they don't frame it like a advertising gimmick. They frame it as pitching evil to stockholders. I mean, they quite literally use that term.
You'd think that you'd have, some marketing executives look at that presentation and go, well, we can put a little bit of polish on this. Some political spin to make it more acceptable to the broader audience. No.
No, it is completely, let's do evil for evil's sake. They don't even have a good reason. Hell, they're ripping off goddamn Lex Luthor's scheme from Superman the movie, because what their plot is that they've bought up all this property in Venice, and now they're going to pollute Venice, and people are going to leave, and all of a sudden their property values shoot through the roof. This is the best scheme you can come up with?
With access to time machines.
Oh, we haven't even got to the time machine yet.
I'm sorry. If I had access to a time machine and wanted to do a get-rich-quick scheme, oh my goodness.
And then, of course, at this point, once they figured out the evil scheme, this is the point where Burke turns out to be a Terminator and tries to throw Ripley under the bus by basically doing that, locking her in a room so she passes out. And then there's an alien in there, and, oh, let's go find the gun. I can't find the gun. Now we're going to wave at the cameras and try and get somebody's attention. That sequence.
Oh, and this guy, this Terminator, he is just so weird. I mean, he comes off as stiff and wooden, but, I mean, okay, you can chalk it up to the fact that he's a freaking Terminator inside.
Up until the point where he is revealed to be a Terminator, he's actually a reasonably normal, if kind of douchey, dude. He's actually has human emotions and human responses, but the second he gets revealed as a Terminator, he turns into robot mode. I will get you. Get the human. Exterminate. Exterminate. Like, what?
Oh, it was so ghastly. I just couldn't believe how terrible that actor was when he made that changeover.
And so Burke chases Ripley and Newt around the complex for a little while. And then, of course, because it happened in the original movie, Ripley and Newt get separated, and she goes down this little water slide thing into the basement, and, you know, Ripley's like, don't move, I'll find you because I've got a tracker on you. And she goes down there, and all of a sudden it's more Burke again, Terminator Burke doing Terminator Burke things. I don't really know what the fuck he's doing. They push him off a ledge after spraying him with like some foam or some shit.
Well, yeah, they had a fire extinguisher.
Which, of course, that's going to shut down your Terminator by spraying him with anti-Terminator foam. And then they get down to the... Oh, and by the way, evil Terminator Burke has set off the self-destruct for the complex because...
You need to have a self-destruct for your complex. How else are you going to know that you need to run away at the last possible second?
And they even, like, lifted, like, lines from the first one where they were, you know, you now have 5 minutes to reach minimum safe distance. I mean, pretty much note for note, the same lines.
Could have used your same voice and you wouldn't even notice the difference.
And so they're behind the big blast doors, and evil Terminator Burke has been killed, and they're like, well, what do we do? And all of a sudden they come around this corner, and there's like this pod thing and like lightning and shit shooting off it, and they kind of, oh, let's go into the pod thing with the lightning. And they go in there, and we get another Weyland-Yutani PowerPoint presentation, where it's like, thank you for choosing Weyland-Yutani Time Machine 4.0. Please have a seat, because the transition of the time machine is a little rough.
They have a part panic room, part time machine, which sends them back to Venice when there were people in it.
They are surprisingly chill for like, hey, you're in a time machine. Oh, okay. And they're back in time. Wouldn't you like maybe
have a little bit of a freak out moment, or at least go, wow, that was cool, or something? No, they're just like, oh, hey, time machine. Neat.
So they start wandering around modern day Venice, and they're like, oh, look at all the modern day Venice stuff. And there's this kid with this cute little race car, and the race car bumps up against like Ripley's foot, and they're like, oh, hi, cute little kid that's going to die in 20 years because Weyland-Yutani is going to poison the planet. And that's when Terminator boot crushes the remote control car, kind of like it was trying to crush a human skull. He's a little out of practice. Because evil Terminator Burke, he has another time machine. He was like, I got in the other pod. I will terminate you. And so Ripley grabs like this bottle and like slashes half his Terminator faces off. And so he's got like this wires and shit sticking out of the side of his head.
The one exposed cyborg eye, obviously a reference to the first one.
And then they go into this cul-de-sac where there's this What happened? I don't remember how it ended.
They didn't have any way of getting out.
Oh, they threw the thing at him.
What the hell was that device, anyways?
So when Ripley gets in the time machine, the helpful Weyland-Yutani PowerPoint presentation gives her this device thing.
Oh, I remember now. It's a come back to the back to the current time thing.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah. That's I remember now. It was a portable time machine so that you could go back through time to the point where you left.
Oh, so the pod only transports people. It doesn't actually move like a TARDIS.
Yeah.
Okay, so they have this go back to the future machine where they throw it at the Terminator catches it, he goes, no!
And gets transported back to the point in time where the explosion is happening, and that destroys him.
We think. He just kind of fades out in this kind of swirly, purpley mass thing.
Wow. And then after the Terminator gets sent back to the original time and gets blown up by the explosion, they're like, hey, here we are, stuck in modern Italy, which doesn't suck now. We're cool.
And so Ripley and Newt, they walk off into the sunset with this voiceover of, now we will change the future for the better. And they roll the credits, presumably fixing Italy and stopping what went wrong, I guess. I don't fucking know.
Ripley is a scientist type. Maybe she can figure out some way of countering the evil oxygen-eating seaweed.
Or maybe just throw Weyland-Yutani under the bus and say, hey, those guys are up to evil, stop them.
There's a variety of things that could be done, but they don't really imply any of those things.
So we praise the movie and its setting and like the steam tunnels and the lighting and how effective that stuff is. There is one area of the movie that absolutely is terrible. The aliens. They look cheap and cheesy, and the problem is they don't use the lighting and the darkness to obscure them because that's the best tool in a special effects man's arsenal. They just put them in bright light and throw some smoke on them and call it a day.
There are many ways you can disguise rubber in a movie. You can put some gel on it. You can spray them with mist. You can put fake blood on them. There's thousands of techniques you can do to obscure the fact that it's a rubber suit. I mean, we've seen this time and time again in lots of movies. And sometimes they do it really well. A great example is Monster from the Black Lagoon, where it's pretty obvious it was a rubber suit, but you can't tell because they actually took their time to try and disguise the fact that it was a rubber suit.
Funny you should bring up Creature because this movie was one of the criteria that Claudia Fragasso and Bruno Mattei were going through their, we want to rip other movies off. They were inspired by The Creature from the Black Lagoon. So there is a little bit of that there.
And you're totally right about the lighting. You just don't put your stupid-looking monster in bright lighting because everyone will know it's a man in a rubber suit. You can do things like screw around with the camera to make something look like it doesn't move like a normal human. That's one thing that they did in Aliens, where when they were shooting the creatures themselves, they screwed around with the frame ratio to make them look like they were moving faster than a human could move. And it came off really effectively.
Well, was it the first Alien or the second Alien where they actually hired a mime for the creature, so it was a little more expressive and a little more...
It was the first one.
You don't get that here. It's just lumbering. It's not any body language. It's just kind of monsters that are there.
They had somebody that was a really odd build, too.
Yeah, it was like a basketball player or something.
Yeah, like part dancer and part basketball player and part mime, and he did an amazing job, even though he was in this god-awfully awkward suit. And it came off really well because just the movement value that the creature had was so strange that it came off being very believable.
Interestingly, for an Italian movie, this thing is pretty light on gore and very light on boobies. We don't get any titty in here and very, very little gore.
Yeah, the gore was surprisingly tame for considering that you've got, aliens running around that want to kill people and all the gunplay that's going on.
And Bruno's not exactly known for his, how shall we say, discretion.
Some of his films are just, wow, over the top in the gore department. And frequently there's quite a bit of nudity, too. This one, no nudity, and the gore is really, really tame and subdued.
You know your movie's in trouble when, in fact, you don't have enough money in the budget for a KO syrup and butcher's trimmings.
It's like, that's kind of a little weak, but on the other hand, maybe they were going for maybe a little bit more family-friendly story. I don't freaking know.
Better international distribution? I don't know. No data.
There's just so many weird things to this film that it's really hard to put a finger on what they were thinking, other than cheap knockoff.
Claudia Fragrasso, the script, or the 50% of the script writing team, in fact, is baffled by why this movie has staying power and why people are enjoying the movie, 30 years after they shot it. They're like, I don't get it. But he's thrilled by the fact that, in fact, people like it. He just doesn't get it.
There's a fair number of movies that one runs into where you're like left scratching your chin after watching it going, I don't know why I liked this.
All right, I think that's pretty much it for Terminator 2.
Marines, we are leaving.
Game over, man. Game over.
With mustard and relish, you'll guarantee mouth-watering satisfaction. And now he slips his costume on a beautiful golden bun. There's his cue to go out on stage.
He's the natural.
He's the rage. Meet this personality at our refreshment counter. Treat the family.
So I'd say hasta la vista, baby, but I made that joke last week, so never mind. Next week, we're going to keep the rip-off train running with another Bruno Mattei flick. Next week, it's going to be da-dun, 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 Cruel Jaws. So join us here for that next week. In the meantime, please drop us an email, thevideonastyproject@gmail.com, and until we gather again, friends, please stay evil.
Faster, fuck off.